A 15-year-old boy walked into a nightmare he never saw coming. One moment he was heading to school like any other morning. The next, a police officer dragged him into a situation designed to break him. By the time he reached the courtroom, everyone expected him to crumble. Instead, he did something no one had ever imagined. He flipped the entire case upside down and exposed a truth that shook every person in that room. This is the story of Malik Carter, a quiet kid, a dedicated student, and the last person anyone would picture in handcuffs. But that was the whole problem. Because on that morning, the truth didn't matter. Only one thing mattered. A cop who thought he could get through with anything. The day started grey and heavy over Eastwood Street, where cricket sidewalks and old apartment buildings made up Malik's daily path to Lincoln Junior High. The air smelled like damp concrete after a long night of rain. Malik walked with his backpack hanging low on his shoulder. It felt heavier than usual, but school anxiety had a way of doing that. He had spent half the night preparing for his science presentation. He also had a pop quiz in history he wasn't ready for. So like any other teenager, his mind wasn't on trouble. It was on school. It was on grades. It was on surviving the day. But trouble was already waiting for him. A loud blast of sirens cut through the quiet morning. Red and blue lights flickered across the windows of a small electronics repair shop. The glass door was shattered, pieces scattered across the sidewalk. Yellow tape was being stretched across the entrance. A shop owner stood outside arguing with an officer. Malik slowed down, curiosity tugging at him. He wasn't close. He wasn't touching anything. He wasn't doing anything wrong. But none of that mattered when he heard a sharp voice behind him. Hands up. Malik froze. The fear hit him instantly. His heart kicked hard in his chest. The voice belonged to Officer Kent Raurn, a man the neighborhood whispered about for all the wrong reasons. Adults warned their kids to avoid him. Teenagers crossed streets when he appeared. He wasn't known for helping. He was known for picking targets. Malik raised his hands slowly, confused and scared. What did I do? His voice trembled, but the question held a quiet strength. Officer Raurn didn't answer. He rushed forward, grabbed Malik's wrist, twisted it back, and slapped a metal cuff onto it with force that sent pain shooting up his arm. Malik flinched and tried to step back, but the second cuff locked round his other wrist. I said we got him. Raurn barked into his radio. He sounded satisfied. As if he had caught a prize. Not a child. Malik's eyes widened. Got who? His breath quickened. I didn't do anything. Raurn gave him a cold look. Dark sweat's heart. Running shoes. Young. Black. That matches the suspects. A crowd began forming. Cars slowed down. People filmed quietly from a distance. Some looked shocked. Some shook their heads. But no one stepped in. Malik felt the heat rising in his chest. Not from anger. From helplessness. Within moments he was pushed into the back seat of the squad car. The door slammed shut with a heavy thud. His backpack lay forgotten on the pavement, left behind like it didn't matter at all. The smell inside the car hit him. Old leather mixed with something stale. His hands were pinned behind his back. Every movement made the cuffs beat deeper into his skin. He wanted to shout. He wanted to back to Aram to check the real footage. He wanted someone to help. But he stayed silent. Fear had a way of stealing words. The drive to the station lasted only a few minutes, but to Malik, it felt endless. The world outside the window blurred. Every street, every building, every familiar corner passed by like a life he was suddenly losing. When the car finally stopped, the door yanked open. Officer Raurn pulled him out roughly. His shoes scraped the pavement. The air inside the station felt cold and hollow. The fluorescent lights buzzed above, humming like distant machinery. They took his name. They took his fingerprints. They took his sources. They took everything that made him feel human. A red-looking officer set him in front of a metal desk. Your mom has been called, he said with emotion. Then he walked through. Malik swallowed hard. His chest tightened. His mother, Mary Carter, worked long night shifts at a nursing home. She rarely slept more than 4 hours. She didn't have time for this. She didn't have money for lawyers. She didn't have the power to fight the system. But she hit him. And he hit her. That was the only thing keeping him steady. Minutes passed. 10 an hour. 10 2. Every second stretched in this weary. Finally, the door swung open. Mary rushed in with fear in her eyes and determination in her voice. She pushed past the officer and wrapped her arms round her son. "Where is H.S. Laur?" she demanded, turning toward the man in the room. "What are you accusing a white child of?" Before anyone could respond, Officer Rauren stepped into the doorway, arms crossed, wearing an expression that dared her to challenge him. "We have video showing him near the crime scene," he said calmly. "A store was broken into. Merchandise stolen. He fits the description." Mary stepped closer. "And what description is that?" Her tone sharpened. "Because right now it sounds like you're describing every boy in this neighborhood." Her anger shook, but she kept her voice steady. Malik watched her, heart squeezing tight. She wasn't just defending him. She was standing against a system that never saw him as a kid. A man in a wrinkled suit entered the room next, shuffling through rotten papers. He looked exhausted, like he had been assigned 10 cases too many. "MHS public defender," he said quietly. "I've reviewed HAS file. Here offering a plea deal." Mary's face widened. "What?" "If he pleads guilty," the law explained, "here waits trial. Gets probation. Community service. Not jailed." Malik blinked, stunned. "Guilty for what?" HAS voice cricket. "I didn't do anything." The law sighed. "It's HAS order against the police officers. Trials are risky. The deal is safe." Mary stepped in front of Malik protectively. "You're not signing anything." The lawyer shook his head like he had heard the same refusal 100 times before. "I understand," he murmured, "but this might be the only path." Malik felt the room closing in around him. He wasn't a fighter. He wasn't a troublemaker. He wasn't even loud. But something inside him snapped awake. Nobody was going to save him. Unless he learned how to save himself. Malik barely slept that night. The ceiling above him felt too close, like it was pressing down on HAS chest. Every sound from the hallway made him flinch. Every memory of Officer Rowan's smirk replayed in HAS mind. The plea deal echoed like a threat. Everyone kept telling him the same thing. "Take it. Just take it. Make this stop." But taking the deal meant surrendering to a lie. It meant carrying a stain he would never escape. It meant giving HAS future to someone who never cared to learn HAS name. Be wise on Risi, he made a decision that felt bigger than him. If the system wasn't built to protect him, then he would learn how to protect himself. He spent the next day in a fucked school, drifting through a morning classes until the lunch bell rang. While everyone rushed out with trays and loud conversation, Malik walked the other way. Straight down the hallway. Past the vending machines. Into the quietest space in the building. The library. It was small and old, with shelves packed tightly and books stacked in uneven rows, like the room had grown round term. The air smelled like dusty pages and pencil shavings. He didn't come here often. But today he needed answers. He went straight to the teen legal section tucked in the corner. The books were heavy and outdated, but they were all he had. He pulled out a thick volume titled Criminal Law Basics. The cover was cricket, the pages yellow. But the information he found inside felt like a Felini. Burden of proof. Presumption of innocence. Chain of custody. Reasonable doubt. He read line after line, absorbing as much as he could. The prosecution had to prove he was guilty, not the other way around. Evidence had to be handled correctly or it could be thrown out. A witness could be questioned about honesty and past behavior. The more he read, the clearer the cracks in the case became. They had no fingerprints. No stolen goods. No clear footage. Just a vague description and Officer Rowan's belief. He turned a page and froze on a diagram showing height measurement systems set in convenience stores. Minicams had markings on the door frame to estimate a person's height. Malik felt something spark in HAS chest. Hope. Real hope. What if the person in the video wasn't HAS height? What if he could prove that from the footage? What if this whole case was built on assumptions? What if the truth had been sitting in a police file the whole time? He reached for another book, throws examination essentials, and flipped quickly. How to question a witness. How to их посечь contradictions. How to ask direct questions that force clear answers. A shadow fell across the table. Malik looked up. Amr, Hilbert, the school librarian, stood there. H.S. Graybert looked uneven, like he trimmed a TV with a pair of classroom scissors. BHS glasses slid on H.S. nose. He watched Malik for a long moment. You're already digging into some heavy stuff, he said. H.S. tone wasn't accusing. IT was curious. Malik hesitated. This isn't something he planned to share. Not with anyone. I just need to learn, he said softly. Hilbert didn't laugh. You ain't a son. The question pulled a knot tight in Malik's chest. He thought about lying. But the worry in the librarian's eyes felt real. The truth slipped out. Yeah. They say I robbed a store. I didn't. And they want me to take a plea deal. Hilbert pulled out the chair across from him and sat down slowly. You're 15, he said. That's too young to be fighting something like this alone. But if you're going to stand your ground, you need to do it right. For the next hour, Hilbert explained the basics of courtroom strategy. How to speak clearly. How to stay calm even when someone tries to intimidate you. How to make a jury see your truth. How to build the art piece by piece until it becomes undeniable. Malik filled pages in HIS notebook. Not just notes. Plans. Ideas. Questions. By the time he left the library, he wasn't just scared. He was preparing for battle. Because he finally understood something important. They weren't expecting him to fight. That's why he had to. The day of the hearing arrived quicker than he expected. The courthouse felt colder than the police station. He walked in with H.S. Matter beside him, her hand gripping H.S. arm tightly. H.S. public defender trailed behind the arm, flipping through a papers as if trying to memorize Malik's name. Inside the courtroom, rows of wooden benches lined the walls. The judge hadn't entered yet. A quiet hum of conversation filled the room. Malik's heart thudded against H.S. ribs like a warning. Then he saw him. Officer Rauren sat near the front, uniform sharp, posture stiff. H.S. face calm. Too calm. Like he already knew how the day would end. Malik looked away. He tried to steady H.S. breath. He tried to remember everything he had read. Everything Hilbert had taught him. He wasn't ready. But he had no choice. When the judge finally took H.S. seat, the room shifted into silence. The prosecutor, a woman with sharp features and a voice that cut through the air like a blade, stepped forward. She told the court the case was simple. A store was broken into. 18 matching the description was stopped near the scene. An experienced officer detained him on probable cause. Everything lined up neatly, she said. Neatly. As if Malik's life was just a fillet in her steak. Then H.S. public defender stood up. He didn't look at Malik. He barely looked at the judge. My client maintains H.S. innocence, he muttered. We believe the evidence may not be fully conclusive. That was it. That was H.S. grand defense. Malik felt heat rise in H.S. chest. He wasn't angry at the man. He was angry at the system that hindered him allowed to overwhelm to help. The judge turned to Malik. I understand you wish to speak on your own behalf. Malik felt H.S. throat tighten. He looked at H.S. Matter. She gave a small nod. Then he stood up. Yes, your honor, Malik said. H.S. voice was steady in a way he didn't feel. I do. And with that single sentence, he began pulling the case apart piece by piece. Malik stepped forward. H.S. palms felt warm, but H.S. fingers were ice cold. Every eye in the courtroom seemed locked on him. He didn't know if he was ready for this moment, but he knew he'd sold torn back. He took a slow breath. The evidence here talking about, he said, it like to see it. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Even the prosecutor blinked. The judge nodded. Display the footage. The lights dimmed slightly as a screen near the jury flickered on. The footage was grainy. A figure in a hoodie moved fast near the electronics shop. The window was already broken. No face. No clear and girl. Just a silhouette shaped by shadows. When the video ended, The prosecutor stepped forward. That is the defendant, she said confidently. The similarities are undeniable. Malik felt something shift inside him. It isn't fear now. It was resolve. No, he said. That isn't me. The room went quiet. Completely silent. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, may I ask the officer a few questions? The judge studied him, then nodded slowly. You may. Malik turned toward Officer Raurn. The man didn't move at first. Each's jaw tightened. Each's fingers tapped the arm of each's seat. Malik asked, Officer, how tall am I? Raurn frowned. I'm not sure. Around 5'5", maybe. I'm 5'3", Malik said. And that video your department shot has a measurement marker next to the door frame. The person in that footage walks past it. Here about 5'9". The prosecutor stiffened. Rowan's expression tightened like a rope pulling at both ends. Malik continued before anyone could react. That's the first problem. A mere spread across the benches. Even some chairs leaned forward. Malik swallowed hard, pushing past the weight in each chest. The second problem, he said, is MOI shoe. He looked directly at Raurn. You inspected MOI shoes when you arrested me. Did you compare the arm to the shoes in the video? Raurn hesitated just long enough for the hesitator to speak for him. The prosecutor stepped in. Shoes are not the deciding factor. Hoodie, sneakers, time, location. It all adds up. No, Malik said firmly. It doesn't. None of it does. Because matching clothes isn't evidence. Being near a street isn't evidence. Enter assumptions from a single officer aren't evidence either. Vich's voice stayed steady, but Vich's heart beat wildly. He had never spoken like this. Never had to defend himself like a lawyer. But right now, this was the only voice he had. The judge adjusted Vich's glasses and turned to the prosecutor. Do you have any direct evidence linking the defendant to the scene? The prosecutor hesitated. Well, we have the officer's statement that. Malik cut in gently but clearly. With respect, Your Honor, a statement isn't proof. Especially from someone who didn't even check the right details. He turned to Raurn, like in case with the man who had thrown him into this nightmare. You arrested me because you assumed I fit a description. You told the court I matched the video, but the height is wrong. The shoes are wrong. And none of the stolen items were found on me. He took a step closer to the table, gripping the edges to steady himself. I brought something with me, he said. He reached into the folder he had carried in with him. Vich's public defender looked confused. Vich's muttered leaned forward, hands trembling. Malik unfolded a printed document. This is a list of internal complaints filed against Officer Raurn over the last 5 years, he said calmly. The prosecutor shot up. Where did you get that? It's public record, Malik replied. And it shows a pattern. A pattern of targeting young people. A pattern of false accusations. A pattern that looks a lot like what's happening to me. The judge took the paper from Malik. He flipped through it slowly. The room felt like it had stopped breathing. Raurn shifted in Vich's seat, Vich's face tightening with every page the judge turned. Malik held the silence for a moment, letting the weight of the truth settle. I didn't break into that store, he said quietly. I wasn't even near it. But he didn't need proof. He just needed someone who looked like me. Someone easy to blame. Someone he thought wouldn't fight back. He turned toward the jury. I know I'm just a kid. I know I don't talk like a lawyer. I know this is the first time we ever stood in a room like this. But I also know the truth. And the truth is simple. I didn't do what Harry accusing me of. A long, heavy pause filled the courtroom. But he did something. He accused the wrong person. He tried to push me into taking a deal so he wouldn't have to answer questions. He didn't care what that would do to MOI life. To MOI future. To MOI family. Raurn finally snapped. This is ridiculous. The kid was at the scene. He matched the description. That's enough. The judge raised a hand. Officer Raurn. Sit down. Raurn opened Vich's mouth again, but the Udge's voice dropped lower. Sit. For the first time that day, Officer Raurn obeyed. Malik felt something shift in the room. A weight lifting. A truth rising. A crack forming in the wall that had been blocking him. The judge set the papers down. We will take a short recess, he said. The gavel struck. Malik exhaled shakily. Chess Matter squeezed Chess' shoulder, whispering something he'd solemnly even hear. Chess public defender stared at him with wide eyes, as if seeing him for the first time. But Malik didn't celebrate. Not yet. Because recess wasn't the end. Recess meant one thing. The real decision was coming next. And everything he had fought for would be decided in the next few minutes. The hallway outside the courtroom felt colder than the inside. Malik stood near a bench, Chess hands pressed against Chess' knees as he tried to steady Chess' breath. Chess Matter stayed close, her face tight with worry and hope then growled together. People who had been watching the trial whispered in small clusters. Some looked surprised. Others looked shaken. No one had expected a 15-year-old to dismantle a police officer's testimony. No one had expected the truth to cut through the room the way it did. Malik kept replaying everything in Chess' mind. The height difference. The choice. The complaints against Raurn. The moment the UDG's pressure shifted. He had dragged every ounce of courage he had into that room. But now that the adrenaline was fading, the fear crept back in. What if it wasn't enough? What if the jury didn't care? What if the system did what it always did to kids like him? Chess Matter placed a hand on Chess' shoulder. You did everything you could, she said softly. Her voice trembled. But you told the truth. All the way through. Before he could respond, the bailiff stepped into the hallway. Everyone returned to the courtroom. The words hit like a drum beat. The moment had come. Malik and Chess Matter walked back inside. The benches filled. The air grew quiet and heavy. Officer Raurn sat stiffly in Chess' seat now. The confidence he wore earlier had cracked. Chess' jaw was clenched tight. Chess survived the judge. The prosecutor read through her notes so fast her papers shook. Then the jury filed in. Malik's stomach dropped. He felt every step they took. Every breath in the room seemed to hold still. The judge nodded to the foreman. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman, a middle-aged man with a nervous swallow, stood. We have, Your Honor. Malik braced himself. Chess' heart hammered so loudly he could barely hear anything else. The foreman looked straight at him. On the charge of burglary, he said, voice steady. We find the defendant, Malik Carter, not guilty. The room didn't explode into cheers. It didn't erupt into noise. It released a long, powerful breath. A collective exhale. A weight lifting from the air itself. Malik felt Chess' knees nearly give out. Chess Matter covered her face for a moment, then pulled him into her arms. Her embrace shook with relief. But the judge wasn't finished. He leaned forward, eyes sharp. After reviewing the evidence and listening to the testimony presented, the court is requesting that the district attorney's office open a formal investigation into the conduct of Officer Kent Raurn. Whispers broke across the room. Even the prosecutor looked stunned. Raurn's face flushed with anger. Your Honor, this is unnecessary. I followed protocol. I acted to it in. The judge cut him off firmly. Officer, if you wish to continue speaking, I advise you to choose your next words very carefully. Based on what we witnessed in this courtroom, there are serious concerns about your actions. Raurn's mouth snapped shut. For the first time, the man looked trapped. Exactly the way Malik had felt 2 days earlier in the back of that patrol car. The judge struck the gavel. This court is adjourned. The sound echoed through the room like a final answer. Malik stood there, feeling the words settle again. He was free. Chess' name was cleared. But the victory didn't feel simple. It felt heavy. Like the beginning of something bigger than him. As they walked out into the afternoon air, the sky finally looked open again. Brighter. Less suffocating. Reporters stood at the bottom of the courthouse steps. Microphones pointed forward. Cameras clicked rapidly. A woman called out. Malik, how does it feel to prove your innocence? He paused. Chess Matter touched Chess' back gently, giving him courage. He stepped forward. It shouldn't have been something I had to prove, he said. The crowd fell silent. Pens froze over notepads. Every camera focused sharply. I didn't do anything wrong, he continued. But the system treated me like I was guilty before they ever asked me a question. And I know I'm not the only kid this has happened to. Not even closer. Ayla Mermer moved through other reporters. He wasn't angry in that moment. He wasn't emotional. His pakevi second strength he didn't know he hit. After the questions died down, he and HAS matru out toward their boss stop. But before they got far, a familiar voice called out. Malik. He turned. Amar Hilbert stood there with a few students from school. Malik blinked in surprise. You did something brave today, Hilbert said. You made Terem see you. Malik looked at the ground for a moment. I only said what was truth. Hilbert stepped closer. Truth is powerful, Malik. Most people never get the chance to shout at in a room like that. You didn't just speak for yourself today. Malik swallowed hard. Yeah, he said. But what about the kids who never get the chance? Hilbert's face softened. Then maybe you're supposed to open doors for Terem. Those words settled deep in Malik's chest. He walked home with Terem echoing in HAS mind. Because everything he had survived in the last 48 hours suddenly felt like the start of a larger fight. And the world was already listening. The days that followed felt unreal at first. Malik kept waiting for the weight to return. For the fear to creep back in. For someone to tell him there had been a mistake. But each morning, the sun rose the same way, the world kept moving, and he woke up free. What changed wasn't the outside world. It was the way he felt inside it. On the third day after the trial, news broke that the investigation into Officer Raurn had officially begun. The local papers printed HAS name in bold headlines. Radio hosts debated HAS conduct. People in the neighborhood whispered about him openly now, no longer afraid to speak. And for the first time, those who once looked down when Raurn passed by now looked up. More stories surfaced. Stories of other boys. Stories of other stops. Stories of deals offered to kids who had never even seen a courtroom before. Some too scared to fight. Others too tired to tear away. Malik realized something he hadn't understood during the trial. HAS case was never just about HAS freedom. It was about tears too. 1 week later, he walked into the school library again. This time not because he was desperate. This time because he had a purpose. The room looked the same as before. Tall shelves leaning slightly. Fluorescent lights flickering near the entrance. Old carpet faded by years of foot traffic. But to him, it felt different now. This place was where everything changed. He walked up to Amar Hilbert's desk, holding a thick notebook under HAS arm. The librarian adjusted HAS glasses and raised an eyebrow. You look like a kid who's carrying something important. Malik set the notebook down on the desk. You've been writing, he said. Hilbert flipped the cover. Inside were pages filled edge to edge. Laws explained in simple words. Right students didn't know they had. Questions to ask if they were ever stopped. Warnings about plea deals. No DS on overdrugs. Information Malik had learned when he needed it most. Hilbert looked up at him, surprised. This is a lot. I want IT to be more, Malik said. BHS voice carried a seriousness that made Hilbert sit back. I want kids to know what I didn't know. I want Terem to understand what people don't teach us. I don't want anyone else to walk into a courtroom feeling like I did. The librarian nodded slowly, pride settling into HAS expression. Then you're doing something powerful, Malik. Malik shook HAS head. I'm just doing what someone should have done a long time ago. He turned slightly, scanning the shelves around him. Other students sat quietly, working through a homework. Some lived softly in corners. Some sat alone, headphones on. But all of them lived in the same neighborhood he did. All of them told have been in HAS place. Any one of them. Hilbert closed the notebook, tapping the cover gently. What do you want to do with this? I want to start a group, Malik said. A place where students can learn their rights. Where they can talk about what's happening around them. Where no one feels alone when something goes wrong. Hilbert's eyebrows rose again. That's a big responsibility for someone you are gay. Malik nodded. I know. But it needs to be done. Hilbert's face softened. You really aren't the same kid who walked into this library last week. Malik paused, then said something he had been holding inside since the verdict. I don't think I ever was. I think I just never had the chance to show it. The librarian smiled, and for the first time since everything happened, Malik allowed himself to smile too. Later that afternoon, Malik walked home through the same streets where he had once felt so small. Cars passed. People chatted outside storefronts. Kids played basketball on cricket pavement. It all looked familiar, but it all felt new. He passed the electronics shop. The window had been boarded up. A new sign hung in the corner. Life was moving forward there too. He stopped for a moment, taking in the empty sidewalk. The place where sirens once echoed. The spot where he had been handcuffed. The moment each word had changed. But he didn't feel fear standing there now. He felt clarity. This was where everything fell apart. And where everything began. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small folded paper he had carried since the trial. A note he had written to himself the night before the hearing. 3 words. Stand for truth. He tucked it back in his pocket and kept walking. Because the story isn't ending here. It was just reaching the point where the world started paying attention. Where his voice carried farther. Where other kids whispered his name like a reason to hope. And somewhere inside him, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He had survived the system once. And he wasn't going to let it break anyone else without a fight. Malik Carter walked home not as a defendant anymore. Not as a victim. Not as a kid who had been accused. He walked home as someone who had faced a system meant to silence him and made that system listen. And this time, the truth wasn't just his to carry. It was something he was ready to share.